Well, the Disability Collaborative has been tasked with the possible task of how to explain financial services for folks with developmental disabilities so that families can plan for their financial future. It's, well, I'm still trying to work on my financial future, so I can imagine how hard it is for families as well. And we realize it's very complicated, and as we planned for this meeting, we wanted to kind of show how things kind of wove together, the integration of all these various sets of service needs to put a strong financial plan together. And we also kind of wanted to be innovative to avoid the whole PowerPoint, bullet point sort of thing, and try to get a conversation going. So we have a very scripted conversation. Monique and I are going to ask a series of questions. We got dozens and dozens of questions, and we're not sure we're going to get through them all, but we're not too worried about that, because after our hour and a half, we're going to break. You all will take a break, and we're going to ask our panelists to take a corner of a table, bring their materials to that corner, and then in 20-minute intervals, we'll cycle through, so allow for individual questions to be asked at those tabletops. So we're going to request that you don't ask questions during the panel, just for the sake of time. But we realize, again, things are complicated, and we might be going down a track that you really want us to steer back away from, or end up in a cul-de-sac that isn't valuable to anybody. So there are Post-its on the tables, and if you have a question, write it down, and Melanie will be over here to take those questions, and then at the end of each round of our questions, we'll ask a few questions. All right? Does that make sense? Okay, great. Some housekeeping things. Really embarrassed about all the wires here. We're breaking every rule in the book, so be careful of the wires. And we are taping, so the goal of this tape is to end up in some websites that they can be accessed at another time for those who can't make it today, or for yourself if you want to come back and go over the material we discussed. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Let me just quickly, Stephen Dale, you all read the bios. This is a pretty impressive group of folks here. I'm so happy they're all here. And Lorna, thanks for making it.
Brandon, good to see you.
We'll be talking. Stephen is going to. Stephen wanted me to make sure that we inform the audience that Stephen is not a part of the CalAble program. He is here to advise on the CalAble program. So he's not getting, he's not with the state of California. He's a private attorney and works on special needs trust, but has, like all, what appears to be all special needs trust lawyers, their hands in all the things one needs to know, and Stephen has taken on a strong understanding of CalAble and can speak, I think, very well on it. Suzanne Francisco is going to talk about a concept that I think all of us need to become more aware of, which is called supported decision-making, and she's going to explain it in more detail, but it's an alternative to conservatorship. And Jonathan Martinez is here. Hi, Jonathan. He's also with the ACLU?
He's with the Burton Butt Institute. He's the senior director of law.
Okay, he's the director of an institute that's very involved in this activity. We are going to become best friends with Kate Brune, because as our sons and daughters begin working, you're going to want to figure out how to manage those wages with their benefits. And Kate Brune, she is a work incentive
Planning and assistance counselor.
Planning and assistance counselor, WIPA.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are few and far between, so we're really happy to have her. Lorna, many of you may know Lorna already. She's always here in our community, active in advocacy well beyond what's needed in Special Needs Trust, but she's going to be here to answer questions about Special Needs Trust. Mike Healy, the Director of Consumer Services at San Andreas Regional Center. He's our go-to guy for that when you're having issues with Regional Center and you need to have your plans, you need to have your services figured out, and Mike, with his team, help all families to get those needed services in their IPPs. Happy to have Michelle Estrada here. She's from Social Security. She will talk today about supplemental security income. And Kate wanted me to make sure I say it right. Social Security Disability Insurance.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, there we go.
SCDD.
And then Janie Whiteford, I'm very happy to have here. She is a consumer advocate, I guess that's a good way to say it. And she's on various boards and consumer committees that keep an eye and help develop policy for in-home supported services. Also, we have experts in our audience, a lot of experts. I think we have an audience of experts here, but I want to point out, I want to say hi to Jan Stokely. We feel that this conversation is going to steer toward housing, although we're really not doing a housing conference. So she didn't make it on our panel, but if we start having those questions about housing, I'm going to ask Jan to speak up. And over there is Pamela Moore, who works at the Department of Rehab. Again, she got cut from the list on our panel, but we may have questions about Department of Rehab, and we'll have her answer those questions professionally. Boy, we have autism professionals, we have residential professionals, we have day employment service professionals, we have supported living professionals, and person-centered professionals here. So we might be depending on the audience to speak up and answer some of our questions. And then finally, we have Monique, who I'm going to put on the spot and say, let's get started and ask some questions.
That's good. I'm going first.
Oh, and members or panelists, be sure to use the mic unless you can project as loud as I can. Okay.
All right.
Go ahead, you're first.
Okay, hi everyone. So the first question is for San Andreas, Dale, and Lorna. Sorry. What are the most important elements of a solid financial plan for an adult child with a developmental disability?
I can start. A couple of things going through this. One is I did bring an article here, which if people want it, my card is here and you can see it. I only have a few, which is called How Much Should I Put in My Child's Special Needs Trust? And like most attorneys, I take 6 pages to say, I have no friggin' idea, okay? and so here's a couple of things that I see here is that, first off, to be realistic about what you're doing. The other thing with it is, whenever I do a presentation, I always start, and for many of you, you can probably imagine this, imagine you have a 17-year-old with autism who is probably going to need supports for the rest of his or her life here. And to my knowledge, nobody's ever died of autism. So therefore, she's going to live 70 years actuarially. So the problem you run into is like special needs trusts are to supplement services that are available. Now, if you look at mental health, we were talking about this in the early days of deinstitutionalization, it was all mental health. IDD wasn't even a consideration. That came later. Almost all those programs are gone. So part of it also is you have to be a good advocate. The reason being, and I know we all have advocacy fatigue, but part of it is if we're supplementing the regional center, what if the regional center weren't here? And it's very possible in the next 70 years that could happen here. So along with it, the last thing is don't make assumptions, because a lot of people assume that our system as it is today is going to stay the same. And even when we're talking about SSI, how many people think the SSI rules will stay the same for the next 70 years? Not even the Social Security person put your hands up. So the thing about it is it's a moving target, and it's one of those things you got to be involved here, and there's no easy answers.
Well, it makes me nervous that Stephen says the regional centers won't be around.
No, there's no guarantee.
Add that resume. Yeah.
What I would think of is kind of 2 tracks. One is every person is different. So there may be people with a disability that are able to work for themselves. And that track would be looking at, starting from school, what sort of job, what sort of training, what sort of preparation does that person need in order to get into the workforce? And then once they're into the workforce, how are they going to find a meaningful job that pays at least minimum wage in the community, a job like everybody else? There are lots of new laws and rules that are kind of coming out that encourage that and support people to do that. So that would be one track to kind of look at. The other track would be maybe your child with a disability might only be able to work some of the time, or they might not be able to obtain a job that can pay a meaningful wage. And so what sort of financial supports would be available for them. Looking at how to access Social Security or how to access special needs trusts or what the ABLE Act is all about. All those different savings plans that can help with people that can't make a living through work in the community. So kind of looking at those two tracks is what I would advise.
Anyone else?
The only thing I want to add, I agree with both of them. It is difficult to calculate, and it is going to vary significantly from, I would say, beneficiary, especially its trust beneficiary, or consumer, regional center consumer, from individual to individual, based on their medical needs. Some people have much more significant medical needs, so maybe they need more significant funding into the special needs trust, because we know government benefits aren't always going to cover the highest quality of medical care or wheelchairs and that sort of thing. And then housing is a big thing too to consider when you're trying to figure out how much we need to fund the special needs trust with. Do you have a home that you can put in there, or are we going to need money in there for rent, or are they going to be living in a regional center services funded housing situation? So there's so many factors. It's really difficult from person to person to determine how much we need to fund a special needs trust with, or what type of assets we need. So that doesn't help clarify anything. But
Well, it does demonstrate the fact that today's goal is just a very broad general overview and to give you kind of the way to set your minds up to start thinking about this process and then beginning the individualized approach that you'll do when you're sitting around the kitchen table talking to your family members saying, okay, what next? The other thing about financial planning is kind of the great third rail of developmental services, because it's really kind of in the hand, it's left in the hands of the family. Oftentimes we are working with schools with special education, or working with regional center for the benefits, and then there's the private side of financial planning, which is probably intervenes more than in the other areas of service delivery. So that brings me to the question, and Mike, I'll have you start, but then others can add in. Michelle, probably you'll be part of this answer. One of the things I'm a little worried about is that families get confused of what I get having a child with a disability as a public service versus what I need to arrange as a privately. So Mike, can you just give a broad overview of the public services that are available to children with developmental disabilities?
Sure. I think part of what people get confused about is they think, oh, the regional center has to be involved in order to access those public services, and that's not necessarily true. The main way that the main service that people access in order to help with their income is Social Security disability benefits.
Yeah.
And,
We have a question about the term, so
yeah, that could be available to people that are part of the regional center or not. There's a separate application process that people go through to do that. Often the question comes up is, how is the regional center involved with that interaction? And that's a matter of who the payee is. So the regional center can become the payee for Social Security disability benefits, but we don't have to be. The issue that happens sometimes is if we're not the payee, then sometimes the communication gets a little more difficult. So people on the Social Security end want to talk to the person that is responsible for it, the payee. So sometimes we can help out, and sometimes we don't. But those services are available to people whether they're part of the regional center or not. Many times we have people, the consumers that are fairly independent, and one of the only things that they really want from us is to help manage their finances, to have their account held up in a special account where we can write the checks to certain people and we can help manage things for them, and that's really all that they need. That service is only available to regional center people, but as far as Social Security disability benefits and things like that, that's available to people that are beyond just the regional center.
and IHSS, right? Janie, you want to give it's a public benefit, and it's different from how is it administered?
Exactly, it's an entitlement program. Anyone 65 or over, anyone with a disability, no matter what age they are, and they also include folks that have, visual impairments. My allergies are killing me, so is it on?
Yeah.
And it's open to anybody, and you have to apply, and then the whole process we'll talk about later that it goes through. But it's one of those programs. It's entitlement, and anybody's eligible eligible, as long as they're Medi-Cal eligible. So there is a financial issue there too.
So that's an interesting thing, because Medi-Cal actually is a federal dollar, it's a Medicaid dollar, but administration of IHSS is through the county, is that right?
Well, partially. It's a federal, state, and county program as administered, as far as you are concerned, at the county level. But there's also there's a lot of input from the feds in the state.
Absolutely. Which is an important thing to keep in mind as you're working through these systems is what set of regulations are applying. And the regional center system is a state law, and mostly state and federal law. IHSS is the only one that really includes county. Well, I shouldn't say that. It includes county as long, and there's other public benefits that are through the county as well. Great. Monique?
Okay, so the third question is a really long question. This is about rights and responsibility. What is the difference between conservatorship and guardianship? We'll start with that one.
Yeah, and I can address that. This is going to vary state by state. So in the state of California, guardianship is for individuals who are under the age of 18. So if the parents aren't available as their legal guardians, we go through the guardianship process to appoint someone to the court system to be their legal guardian. Once a child turns 18 in the state of California, it switches to conservatorship. For individuals with developmental disabilities, it's called limited conservatorship. Of all conservatorships, whether it's limited or a general or a mental health conservatorship, there's two types that fall under that as well, which is conservatorship of the estate and conservatorship of the person. Typically, in a limited conservatorship situation, we're looking at conservatorship of the person only, and this is because we're hoping that the adult child's assets are all in a special needs trust. As long as their assets are all held outside of their own name in a trust, no conservatorship of the estate is needed. So we just have conservatorship of the person, which is actually a really good thing. I want to address just really quickly durable power of attorney too, which is the next one. Can I?
Yeah, so the others are power of attorney, authorized representative, care manager, advocate, representative, payee, and supported decision making. That's a big question.
I just want to bring up the power of attorney because I hear a lot of people say, isn't signing a durable power of attorney an alternative to going through this whole conservatorship process that involves the court? And it's not necessarily an alternative. It depends on the situation. A power of attorney is basically a contract where someone is signing a document to give someone else the authority to make decisions on their behalf. I want to first state that this is a joint power. It's not that this person can supersede. So if I sign a power of attorney and let Michael become my attorney in fact, it doesn't mean he can override my decisions. It just means he can make decisions on my behalf. For individuals who are eligible for limited conservatorship, typically we say they lack the capacity to enter into a contract. And so often they don't have the capacity to enter into this power of attorney. I understand there are some people in that gray area that are pretty high functioning and maybe a power of attorney could work. But remember, it's not as protective. So one, the individual still retains all their own rights. So they can still enter into contracts, they still can be taken advantage of, they can revoke that power of attorney at any time. And like I said, it is a joint power, so it's not quite as protective. And it's not always an alternative. It's typically for individuals who can't be conserved.
Authorized representative?
Go ahead.
Authorized representative is with Social Security. An authorized representative is an individual who can represent a claimant or a recipient who is having a particular issue with Social Security. For example, they can assist in filing an appeal. They can assist in filing an initial claim. They can assist in filing a waiver, or they can assist in an individual resolving any particular issue that resulted in an adverse action or what we call a change in payment. And that the authorized representative status is only good until that particular issue was resolved. And then after that issue is resolved, there's a 65-day period where the authorized representative can continue for the appeals process of that issue. But then once the appeals period is over with, that representative no longer has access to the information for Social Security. And generally, it's not the ability to make actions on the claimant's behalf. It's the ability to assist the individual in turning in documents, providing letters or having a main point of contact between Social Security, as well as actually report changes. So that's basically what they do. They have no authorization to receive payments. They have no authorization, basically, to any other aspect other than information disclosed about the case and providing documentation to us and assisting the claimant in that part.
And how is that different than the rep payee?
Representative payee is a fiduciary agent. So basically, when individuals are incapable of receiving direct payment for whatever particular reason, our job is actually to find an individual who can be responsible for receiving the payment on the individual's behalf, using the money for their care and support, and then also they are responsible for reporting any and all changes that may affect the payments of the individual. So they have a higher responsibility. Social Security, in fact, does not recognize power of attorney. So anyone who comes to our agency and tries to act on an individual's behalf and they present a power of attorney, we have to decline them because we do not recognize it. The individual, for our purposes, that we recognize that we can make changes with is a representative payee who we designate ourselves. We have an application process.
Can I comment on that as well? So individuals who go through the conservatorship process often think that that is what gives them the ability to manage the assets. And no, it's being representative payee, and that's separate. And a person does not need to be conserved for the person to be rep payee. And we don't have to have conservatorship of the estate for the rep payee to manage the assets that they're receiving, the Social Security benefits.
So I think the overall concept you have to look at is, and by the way, I'm up in Contra Costa County, so we probably do more limited conservatorships than anyone. But here's the thing with it is, a conservatorship basically is limiting or taking away somebody's civil rights. And it's one of those things that if you're going to do that, you better have a damn good reason. And I think the theme that we should have throughout this, and I'm sure that my colleague here is going to talk about that a lot, is finding the least restrictive alternative. And, you know, one of the things that's come up is that conservatorships in some areas have become kind of a rite of passage. In fact, my largest, regional center, don't listen to this, my largest referral source is caseworkers of regional centers, which is a vast change. There's a lot of times when limiting somebody's civil rights makes sense, but we are limiting their civil rights. So really the key is finding the least restrictive alternative. The other thing that I'll mention with all these are all tools for helping or assisting or managing assets. And you don't have to choose one or the other. So you can work a power of attorney in with supported decision making, a limited conservatorship. You don't have to take all rights and whatever. But it's one of those things that for families that are looking at doing this, really it's an education process here. It's not a rite of passage, even though I need the business. Okay.
And so that brings us to Suzanne. Maybe you can give a brief overview of what is supported decision making.
So supported decision-making is an alternative to conservatorship. It is a process that recognizes friends, families, and professionals that can help the individual understand the decisions and choices that they make in their life and assist them to make those choices. And so supported decision-making is really a way that we empower people to have self-determination in their lives, and that is proven to have people be safer, healthier, recognize and resist abuse, and basically they're learning decision-making skills. And there's a team of people that assist the individual called the supported decision-making team. Whereas there's no studies for guardianship that prove that there is less abuse when people are under guardianship, there are studies with self-determination that abuse is decreased and reduced. And it's also endorsed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Autism Self-Advocacy Network, and also by the National Association of Guardianship, and also the American Bar Association.
And the Latterman Act itself has, the way it's written is for the individual to be the ultimate choice maker. So it doesn't specify it exactly, but supported decision making is definitely the language that you hear in the Latterman Act.
Hi, I just wanted to add one thing.
We have an audience professional. Here we go.
I might say the definition that I just gave you was by Jonathan Martinez and Peter Blank. So.
Hi, I'm Jonathan.
Hey.
I am actually the project director of the National Resource Center for Supported Decision Making. Everything Suzanne said is correct. Everything you said is correct. What you said is correct about your law as well. I want to add one thing to that. How many parents or people with disabilities do I have here? Hands? Okay. Who here wants your child to be as independent as possible? Who here wants your child to be as employed if they can do that as possible? Who wants your child to have friends? Who wants your child to live in the community if that's possible? So I want to tell you about one study, which was done here in California and all across the country. It's called the National Core Indicator Study. Now, what the National Core Indicator Study did was it reviewed people with intellectual and developmental disabilities apples to apples. Okay, similar abilities and limitations to similar abilities and limitations. They even used the old school standard, mild, moderate, and severe. And what they did was they looked at people's quality of life across a whole bunch of variables. One of the variables they looked at was whether or not people had a guardian or conservator. And here's the thing. Across the country, across California, here's what they found. Apples to apples. People who did not have guardians or conservators were more likely to be independent, employed, have friends other than paid staff, date and socialize in the community and practice the religion of their choice than those that did have guardians. The point of supported decision-making is not to say there should never be a guardianship or conservatorship. It may happen. Your child may need a conservator. But if we know that the one thing possibly standing in between all of those things that you want for your children and not having those things could just well be not having a conservator, doesn't that mean we should think about it? You said it's become a rite of passage, and it should not be. The advice I give to parents is this: don't rush. Think about what you want for your child. Think about what your child may be missing, and think about ways we can empower them to have that. Where's the rush? We can find ways for people to get those things, and the studies for 40 years have backed it up. So just think before you jump. Conservatorship, in Ms. Drope's word, may be a good thing. It may not be. What's the rush?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to also comment that limited conservatorships, it states in the Land Treatment Act, in the statutes, that the conservator is required to teach the conservatee maximum self-reliance and independence. That's not true with the general conservatorships, but it is with the limited conservatorships. So we're supposed to be working with that individual to help them become employed, sort of like the whole supported living thing, but only through, now they have the ultimate authority, right? But still, they're supposed to be teaching them maximum self-reliance and independence. And I'm just wondering, with that study, cause and effect, are the people who are more, employed and more independent because they didn't need the limited conservatorship to begin with, or which cause and effect? Exactly. And maybe it's the guardian. Perhaps it's conservatorship too for people who are elderly and not limited.
Point. It's a really interesting point, but here's the problem with it. Other national studies show that up to 90% of conservatorships in this state and across the country are general. Although we talk about limited conservatorship, the numbers don't back it up. So here's the thing. If Ms. Drope is correct, and people didn't need that conservatorship in the first place, maybe your child doesn't need a conservatorship. Think. It may be that you're right. A person may need it. But to say it is a rite of passage is, to me, sinful. And I speak as a parent of 2 children. And I think about the things, what they may or may not need. I'm not here to say there should never be a conservatorship, but I'm here to say if you think your child may have abilities, pursue them. Think about them.
Can we discuss medical decisions and how that plays into this?
Danny, let's hold off on your question, okay? And I'm going to propel the conversation a little further. You have a little post-it. Write your posted question.
I just want to share too that I'm also a parent of 3 children with special needs. My children have congenital muscular dystrophy and autism, and I want to give them all the chances and opportunities that they have to be as independent as possible. So that can involve visuals, and I know we have a lot of other questions.
Great.
Let me just do
Go
a
ahead.
little.
Oh, this is good. We gotta.
Regional Center Pacific
Well, what do you know?
We at the Regional Center, we agree that conservatorship really isn't the way to go, if possible. We believe that people should have as many choices as they possibly can, even if those choices aren't the choices that we would make. If someone does go through the process of conservatorship, and with Regional Center people, I haven't heard much of general conservatorship. I've heard only of limited conservatorship for people in the Regional Center. Part of the process is that there's an application, and the Regional Center does have one of our psychologists that goes out to talk to the person that is being potentially conserved to see about what their decision-making is like. And then it goes in front of it. There's other investigators that go out there, but our general position is that people should not be conserved because it is a denial of their rights.
The thing is with this, and I suppose we could do the whole day on conservatorship. Look, we probably, in my office, probably turn about a third of folks who come to us with a conservatorship away. And I think the better attorneys who do this work, that come to conferences like this, whether you're participating or sitting in the audience, are going to learn about less restrictive alternatives. I think as part of our job as professionals to be those teachers and not to be selling stuff. It's an individual process. It should always be finding the least restrictive alternative. There are some regional centers that absolutely oppose every conservatorship. That is wrong. There are some regional centers that either don't oppose them or do an incredibly ineffective job. That is wrong. The problem that we also have, and there's going to be a lawsuit coming out in Los Angeles very soon that's going to put a lot of light on this, is unfortunately we're not putting the resources into decision-making, whether it's conservatorships or what it is. The courts don't have the resources to do it. The regional centers, with the caseload they have, they don't have the resources to do it. This is something that's been shoved by the wayside. Civil rights is damned inconvenient, but it's a really important thing to do. So you go back to this. When I say it's a rite of passage, it's become a rite of passage. And if we were going to spend more time on this, the whole medical thing is something where HIPAA has increased this, but we still need to find alternatives. And for instance, Texas has been able to put their programs together and make it work. For God's sake, if Texas can make it work. On the other hand, there are times when people's rights need to be limited, but we need to pay a lot of attention to that, right?
And I think some of the other questions you're going to ask
Well, let me
talk
ask-
more about how to do that, but
I want to
you can also
jump,
come
because I
back.
think your pushback from families is going to be this question. Ultimately, if an adult child with a developmental disability is not conserved, and there is no support available from family or people close to the person with the disability, and the person with the disability can no longer care adequately or make responsible choices for themselves, what is a family to expect?
I think the question is, what questions have you asked before you got to this question or this decision? What have we tried first? I think the question is, what can that individual do now? Every individual with a disability makes some choices every day. So what can they do, not what they can't do? And then you would have a support team. So as a parent, I feel like I'm not alone. I have a team of people for my own children, and also I'm an advocate for the clients that I'm working with. And so basically supported decision making is what can they do with assistance, and those things that they need help with, then they may need more help in those areas. And I think you mentioned if they don't have a support person in their life.
There are times when the family members or friends have kind of, it's dissolved a bit, so there is that worry that families have.
Yeah, and so that could be a case manager. I know we have a case manager in the back. A case manager that could help, or another professional. And in the self-determination program, if the pilot ever starts happening in the state of California, there's a thing called an independent facilitator, and that's very akin to supported decision-making team member. So finding somebody, if that we really want the individual to be the agenda, and for people working with them on the team to not have their own agenda, but sometimes they may need to have support and professional to help them find the services that they need to address their areas.
Suzanne's totally right, and I think what happens is as people get older, their support team kind of changes.
Yeah.
So maybe when people are younger, their support team is mainly their parents or their grandparents, and as they get older, there are different people that come in and out of their lives. So that support team needs to evolve and change as people evolve and change. So I think that's one of the key points to supported decision making.
And if I could mention something with this, I've been doing this kind of work now for 3 decades, so I've gotten to see a lot of changes. The enforcement of HIPAA for medical decisions doubled the amount of conservatorships we did. A lot of parents would come to me and go, "Well, should I conserve my child?" And go, "Has anybody ever opposed you with a decision, especially a mother of a disabled child, because if you're going to post a mother of a disabled child, you better be ready for some pushback, maybe. Yeah. So, but the thing about it is that, one thing to consider is that under the law, if the person doesn't have capacity to make medical decisions and there is no conservatorship, it's the regional center that has the ability to do that. That's not necessarily bad. There are 21 regional centers. Some are very person-centered, some not so much. By the way, I actually like SARC here. But also, I've done this a long time. I have seen regional centers change radically. Regional Center of the East Bay is a good example that went from not being person-centered to being person-centered, and now we're about to change our management. Where are we going? We don't know. So, a big issue that I know we deal with families on is the medical decision-making. Once again, always looking for the least restrictive alternative.
And I'm glad you brought it up, because if you come and see us at the table afterwards, there are model forms and sample decision-making agreements that can be folded into legal binding contracts. Those are your IEP, those are your IPP, your employment plan. That can be written into those legal binding contracts.
So I think the thing to remember for our topic is that limited conservatorship, there are lots of different powers to that. And one of the powers is the power over the estate or over a person's money. But it doesn't mean that that's the only piece of conservatorship. And maybe one of the next forums that we have will be about conservatorship. And
it's great. Well, and Lorna does this privately. You have a lot of workshops.
Yeah, we have, in fact, May 10th, I'll have flyers at my table. May 10th is a workshop coming up on limited conservatorships, and we talk about all the alternatives, as well as the fact, as Stephen mentioned earlier, if your child's fairly high functioning and you just want that medical power, you can file conservatorship, for example, just for the medical power, so you can have that decision. And one thing in here, it says something about if we don't have family members or friends, what is that type of conservatorship called? If there are, when your child gets older, if there's no family or friends, and you don't want to just leave it in the hands of the regional center, hoping that the regional center is going to be there without you advocating for your child. We know the regional centers are all overworked and the service coordinators are really busy. If you want someone there just to have a voice for your child, there are different options, such as the Good Shepherd Fund is a nonprofit organization that will serve as conservator in the absence of any family or friends that are able to serve. And maybe you limit that power just to medical or something, so that you have someone watching over your adult child when you're no longer here.
Did you have something, Michelle?
Yes, I'm actually learning a lot of information about conservatorships. You don't know how many times in our agency where our agents are actually talking to people, maybe you should conserve your child, maybe you should do this. And we're not really aware of supportive decision making, which I'm really excited about being able to bring back to my agency. But what I'd like to share is that I know that conservatorship, just from the conversation, isn't what ideally people are looking for, because we want to create the sense of independence in our children. But when you think about these things in the future, if there is no community for your child, or if, once you're gone, who's going to be taking the reins, to think about your options, because we have individuals that come into our office that are terribly disabled, that don't have anybody to be the representative payee. We can't find them a representative payee because of their status, and they are constantly having problems. They're not getting their payments. Their payments are constantly stopped. They're having a lot of issues. They're often removed from the office because they're so agitated and they can't get their money, and we can't find anybody to help them. So it's always good to think about having something set in place for your child. If, it comes down the line and you are no longer there, what's going to happen? Who's going to take the reins? And there's a lot of places that you can go. Generally, we turn to Santa Clara County Public Guardian. I don't know if that's preferred in terms of where we can send people, but when you have people with such difficult developmental disabilities where they don't even understand what's going on around them, it's really hard to try to coach them to help themselves. Absolutely.
So we have, Linda, I have a feeling you might want to move this toward the thought of person-centered planning, or where were you going?
I'm going to just make my own personal comment about conservatorship.
Why don't we hold off on it, okay? I think we're going to do round robin, and I want to move forward. We're kind of in a cul-de-sac here, so let's move to special needs trust.
We're gonna move to trust and savings. Lorna, can you please give a brief special needs trust 101 overview?
At least this is less controversial.
Yeah.
Everyone can agree that a special needs trust is a very valuable instrument. We mentioned it earlier with the very, kickoff about financial planning and putting money in a special needs trust. Well, what is a special needs trust? A special needs trust is a special type of trust where you can transfer assets into that trust, allowing your child or your loved one with a disability to continue to qualify for needs-based government benefits, such as SSI and Medi-Cal, or anything else that looks at assets and resources. If it's in a regular kind of trust that you would leave to your other typically developing children, it's going to be considered an available resource, and your child is going to be disqualified from government benefits. So that's one of the big purposes of a special needs trust, is to preserve and maximize needs-based government benefits, but it also helps to prevent your child or loved one with a disability from harm and exploitation as well, because you'll have a trustee on that trust managing the money. That's it, simple. Simple.
And,
101.
how much is needed to set up a special needs trust? What assets are the most common?
Oh, what kind of assets would you put into a special needs trust? Well,
She's saying how much is needed to be
And how
in
much is,
the trust.
how much?
to set up a trust?
Yeah.
Well, you don't really need anything to set, if we're talking.
$1.
Huh?
Yeah.
$1,
The
so it
trust
is
that we
funded.
see $1.
We always say
Yeah.
$10. We put $10 on the schedule. To open an account, you'd need some money to open an account. But we prepare special needs trusts that are what we call standalone special needs trusts that we don't fund until the parent's death often. So it's a trust that's already created, but we don't fund it upon death. So you can create it now, you can fund it now, or you can fund it upon death. So you can begin without assets.
May I ask you something? A lot of the parents that we come in that have trusts, we ask what's the financial account associated with the trust, and they often say, "Oh, I don't know." So could you give us some information about how we set up this trust, which is the legal document, and then the account that's associated with the trust where the assets are therefore then posited to and then dispersed?
Well, one thing I want to mention is a lot of times families will have a special needs trust that's carved out of their revocable living trust. So there wouldn't be an account set up yet, but often the other option is to have a separate document. So you can put almost anything into the trust, but so something basic, you walk into a bank, say I have a special needs trust, I want to open an account in the name of the special needs trust, they'll ask you for some information and you can set up a bank account. But anything can be in there. You can put houses, whatever, real property in there, and brokerage firms, but simple, basic level is open a bank account so you can start depositing money.
So at the initiation of the trust, it doesn't necessarily mean that a financial account will be initiated.
Correct. Typically not by the attorney that's setting it up, but we normally do advise clients on how to do the next steps to set up an account.
The other thing you have to, when you're doing that kind of thing, and one of the biggest mistakes people make, and this is where partnership is so important, is you can have a great trust put together, but let's assume that the beneficiary, which we shouldn't assume, all folks don't have capacity, but let's assume this person doesn't have capacity. You have to make sure that, like life insurance policies that are dedicated to the trust, make the trust the beneficiary. You have to make sure that it actually goes in there. And here's what happens if you don't. Then that asset, instead of going into that trust, ends up having to go through a conservatorship of the estate. And now you have lawyers and judges managing the money. Thank you. Here, which is generally not the best way to handle things. A lot of this is to avoid probate. As far as what you can put into it, you put houses under qualified plans. You can put life insurance. You can put almost anything in it. You can't put a naval account in it, though.
That's true. One of the things we do too when we set up trusts is we advise clients on how to retitle all their assets. So when you do a special needs trust, typically we're doing a revocable living trust as well to avoid probate, and we counsel our clients how to retitle all assets in the name of the trust and make sure beneficiary designations on life insurance or retirement benefits are all changed, no longer in that loved one with a disability's name, but instead either goes to the special needs trust or the revocable living trust. Yeah, funding is really important. People spend a lot of money on estate plan and then we end up going through probate or having the courts supervise assets.
And then who oversees the special needs trust and the trustee?
So it depends on who the person who creates the trust can determine who's going to be the trustee. Typically, parents will be the trustee during their lifetime, and then they can appoint a successor trustee upon their incapacity or death. It can be friends, relatives, corporate fiduciaries, private fiduciaries, if you don't have any family members that you want to put in that position. And typically we have, in my trust, we have a couple other individuals or parties involved, and I think Stephen does as well, that we can have a trust protector or a committee, as well as care managers. So there's a lot of other parties we can put in, but the trustee is the one that's going to manage the assets.
And I think the biggest issue as to whether the trust is going to work or not work is the choice of trustee and management system. And the problem that you see with these things all the time, and you probably do the same thing, we do an enormous amount of work fixing broken special needs trusts. And think about it, for you family members, you have changed since you joined the disability community. It has changed your life in ways you probably don't know. And you're learning about benefits, you learn about conservatorships, you learn about SSI, and then you go, I'm going to turn the management over this to my brother who's a CPA. He's a really smart guy, and he'll be able to do this, and he'll be able to deal with all these different issues. That trust is going to fail, okay? And the thing with it is that, once again, special needs trusts, I think, are great tools, but the problem with it is you need to make sure you have a management system that actually is going to have folks who can work with this. And I think part of what we try to do is try to empower families to be involved and the consumer as much as we can, but we need to make sure that the folks that are managing the trust really are equipped to do that. And oftentimes the family member you choose is the most expensive person you could possibly choose, because even if they don't charge, I actually had a beneficiary a couple of years ago die from the anxiety of losing her benefits. And it's like the old joke here for the surgeon. Hey, the good news is we got him back on his benefits a week after we found him dead. And the doctor was clear that the anxiety from losing his benefits was one of the reasons. And this is serious stuff. So there.
So.
On a more cheery note.
Special needs trust. I'd like to add some things about special needs trust.
Yeah, go ahead.
If your child is going to be on supplemental security income, which is the government assistance program that the federal government administers, I'm actually a claim specialist in that program, you're going to want to talk to us about your trust, because we don't define necessarily a special needs trust the way that other individuals define a special needs trust. We actually have specific regulations and rules what constitutes a special needs trust to Social Security. And so when you're making your trusts, we actually have, trusts are actually a relatively new concept to Social Security, and the laws are constantly changing. And we have a rigorous review process on it, because as you can imagine, we're not legal individuals, we're not trained in composing trusts, but we are the ones to decide if they're countable or not towards the SSI resource limit of $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a couple. So you're going to want to talk to us to see really what your trust is in terms of Social Security definition, and if it's going to actually be countable or not. Because if it's not countable, then you're disadvantaging your child, and you will not be eligible for public payments if it's countable for our purposes. And we actually have resources available, policies that you are actually able to read and review, that indicates the different types of trusts that we're aware of and that we define and how they affect eligibility.
So a good question you might want to ask your attorney is, are you up to date on how Social Security perceives special needs trusts?
Yes.
And the lawyer should have a good, I'm sure Lorna and Stephen have great answers to that, but that might be a test. And
I was going to say too, because IHSS is under the Medi-Cal regulations, that could really impact if it's not included in this, it's not an excluded amount of money, then you're jeopardizing the opportunity that you might have for getting IHSS. Although I do know that ABLE accounts are exempt.
so I saw somebody had a hand up. Go ahead and put it on a post-it. Okay,
To clarify that.
and I'm going to move it over to Cal Able right now. And Stephen can give a quick overview of Cal Able.
Not possible. Anyway,
And Michelle had-
It was with Cal Able, so I'll let him go ahead and introduce it, and then I'll go ahead and introduce.
I'm keeping an eye on time.
with this proviso, I am very knowledgeable about Cal Able, and I would suggest that all of you that are interested in this, if you look up Cal Able, you can get on all sorts of mailing lists and that kind of thing. I'm just a private attorney. Let me just go through a little bit, and we can also go through, as we talk about this, how ABLE programs actually can work with special needs trusts and the difference between the two of them. What an ABLE account is, it's a federally mandated program across the country. I know one of the questions here that I'll just answer early, when can I open up an ABLE account? And the answer is today. So once again, we use the Ohio program right now. Eventually the Cal ABLE program should be open this fall. They're taking their time, and I think it makes sense. They're doing it right. In order to do it, and for this group, this shouldn't be difficult, you have to show you meet the definition of being disabled before the age of 26. Now, you can do it two ways. You can either be getting one of the disability programs like SSI, SSDI, Child with Disability Benefits, or that kind of thing before the age of 26, or you can get a certification that you would have qualified had you applied. For instance, a lot of folks with mental health issues, it's not uncommon that they don't get their benefits until they're in their 30s. It doesn't mean they weren't disabled before the age of 26. And we don't have a ton of time, but this is one of the loosest programs I have ever seen in my life. It's run by the Department of Treasury.
Yeah.
It is incredibly loose
Yeah.
here, jaw-dropping loose. Social Security, by definition, has a ton of rules, and they have the POMs, which I read every day. The rules here are very short, okay? I mean, there's not to it. With it, there is a lien on the funds when the person passes away from the time the account was established, okay? Now, there is a bill pending, and nobody knows it'll pass or not, that for the CalAble program and the CalAble program only, they may forgive the lien, but otherwise, all the programs have liens. You can use it for what are called qualified disability expenses, and I'm not sure I can remember them all, but you can use it for housing. By the way, housing's a big issue. You can use it for all sorts of support issues. You can use it for travel. You can use it for burial expenses. You can use it for legal expenses. So that was cool here. There's a ton of things you can use it for. Even the things you're not supposed to use it for were being recorded, right? The penalty is so laughable. There's sometimes I kind of wonder why you would follow the rules, but we should follow the rules here. We should always follow the rules. Maybe. Okay, anyway.
And the
spirit of the law. It's a developing area. The thing about it that's a really big issue is who can set it up and who's in control. And we go back to the capacity issues. If you have the capacity to set it up, then the person with a disability can set up their own ABLE account. Otherwise, it is the parents or the conservator or guardian here who can set these things up, or an agent under a valid power of attorney. One of the things, and by the way, this green sheet here, I have been obsessed by ABLE for the last 10 years. I know it's only been out for about a year, but this has been going on for some time. I have now 24 videos on the ABLE Act on all sorts of different subjects. So once again, there's no way to do justice to this. Capacity is a huge issue when we're dealing with folks with IDD. The other thing is kind of the comparison and contrast, and then I'll do something hard for an attorney, I'll be quiet. One thing about the Special Needs Trust, okay, and I come from a civil rights background, is the reason a Special Needs Trust works is the trustee has sole and absolute discretion over the assets in the trust. Therefore, it's not a resource. Now, that means that your child, who's the beneficiary, could make the most reasonable request under the sun, and the trustee has the ability to say no. No means no, okay? Now, for those of us in the civil rights world, anybody got a problem with that? I mean, I do, and I set them up every single day. Sometimes that might actually be the objective, but if our focus is helping people be as independent as possible, we've got a problem with that. On the other hand, an ABLE account is the exact opposite. If the person has capacity, they have complete control over that account. Getting back to the supported decision-making concept, you know, the problem we have with a lot of folks with disabilities is they make one screw-up and we go, well, we're never doing that again. I'll give you an example. My niece, I opened up an ABLE account for her, and she's in New York, and the first thing she did is went out and bought stuff she wasn't supposed to do, okay? Whoops, okay, but that's how you learn. And sit down and go, Erica, you're not supposed to do that. How are you going to teach people how to manage money if they don't have money? A lot of the concepts I've been working on is how do you tie a special needs trust into an ABLE account really to get the best of both worlds, because we really do want folks, depending on the situation, to have as much independence as possible. So a lot of the strategies that I have in these videos, which I'm teaching to other attorneys and all that, is how can we tie the two things in together and be able to give a person with a disability some autonomy. So for instance, with Erica, we've set up a special needs trust for Erica, and here's another important concept. We have all family members that are making contributions. Erica's parents don't have a lot of money. Her needs when her parents pass away are probably astronomical, so all the aunts and uncles are making contributions to this trust because we care about her. We also want her to be as independent as possible, and we want her to learn how to manage funds. This becomes a great tool. There are lots of things about it. Like a lot of things, it's neither good nor is it evil. It's neither right nor it's wrong. You got to study it and figure out what makes sense. The only other thing that I've seen is some programs have oversold this program and omit really important things, because what's going on is we want to have a strong program, for instance, in California, but it's a financial product that's being sold by the state. They desperately need to open up as many accounts as possible. We need to embrace this. We need to have a strong program, but we need to fit it to the individual here and make sure that this makes sense as far as capacity issues, control issues, lien issues, that kind of thing. I think it's a marvelous tool. It opens up doors. Is it an alternative to special needs trust? I would say very rarely would it be an alternative. That's as fast as I can go.
And you can build supported decision-making language into a power of attorney that says, I want this person to make certain decisions, and my express wishes will be honored in all of the decisions that they help me with. So this can be specifically financial. I will not buy, sell, I will only spend this X amount of money without the express wishes of the individual.
I'd like to talk about.
Michelle you're going to talk about CalAble weaving in with Social Security?
Yes, I want to talk about how financial instruments that you're looking into will affect eligibility for SSI. Social Security Disability Insurance, which is the other program, resources don't really affect that program, but it affects your SSI. So when we're talking about CalAble accounts, we want to be really aware of what the actual rules are. We exclude the balance of the account up to $100,000. That's it. Anything over $100,000 then begins to count towards the resource limit of $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a couple. So you have to be aware of that. So you can't just get happy and fund this trust with all kinds of money and say it's not going to affect my child in any way. No, that's not the case. You also have to understand when you're creating these financial institutions how disbursements from, instruments, how disbursements from these instruments also can affect SSI as well. But before I go into that, for the ABLE, we can't draw inference regarding disability from a certification. So necessarily, if they get a certificate of disability, that's not going to necessarily qualify an individual to be able to open up an ABLE account. So you have to take that into consideration when you're talking about a person with a disability and how that's defined. Also, you have to think about the tax implications and how much you can put into an account annually. So generally speaking, there's a limitation. The ABLE account can only receive from all sources the amount the pre-donee gift tax exclusion in effect for the calendar year is. For 2016, that's $14,000. Any disbursement from a CalAble account isn't considered to be income for SSI purposes. It's actually considered to be what we call a conversion of resources. So if someone pulls the money out of the account, let's say they pull out $5,000, and if they spend it in the month, they're okay. But if they keep that $5,000 outside of the account for the next month, it's a countable resource, and you've just made your child ineligible for SSI for that month. So you have to think about what you're doing with these accounts. Same for trusts. Trusts, we don't actually consider disbursement from trust a resource conversion. We actually consider it income. So anytime you pull out income from that trust to buy things for your child or to give them cash directly or to pay for their food or shelter costs, it can affect their SSI payment. And you actually have to keep your records to show us how many disbursements have you done in the review period? What were they for? Should we have reduced the income because we were unaware that we were using this to pay for things that we would count? So you have to think about that and understand record keeping is important, and talk to us. Ask us questions. We're willing to help you and tell you how to guide you to make sure that your children have a higher quality of life and still keep their benefits.
Two comments on this, and there's just so this should really be a 2-day conference. Here, piggybacking on this, on the SSI, especially for this community, once again, as she said, When it goes over 100,000, it goes into suspension. But here's an important thing, and I know a lot of folks who do
Actually, that's
special needs
correct.
trust work.
It's correct that if it goes over
100,000.
100,000, every dollar over the 100,000 counts toward the resource limit.
Right.
So if it's 102,001, they are ineligible for SSI.
So basically, one of the rules of SSI is you can't have resources over 2,000, which I think was set in 1987. And if it had the most conservative cost of living increase, that should be about 18,000. 2,000 is a ridiculous number, but that's just what we got. Here's the problem that you run into is, as you said, if you give somebody cash directly that's unearned income, it limits their benefits dollar for dollar. If you transfer it into the ABLE account and they use the ABLE account, then it doesn't. The other thing that comes up, going back to the SSI, is for folks with developmental disabilities. If your disability began before the age of 22, and by definition, folks with developmental disabilities is before the age of 18, your child will probably qualify for a program called Childhood Disability Benefits. Which means that when you become disabled yourself, when you go on Social Security, or when you pass away, your child will get what's called Childhood Disability Benefits, which is an entitlement. So here's the only point when you're doing this, and this is why working with somebody knowledgeable is so important. It may very well be by the time that account hits 100,000, they won't be on SSI anyway. They'll be on Childhood Disability Benefits, which can be a game changer. And this stuff ain't easy. I'm just here to tell you.
So, a couple things. I want to keep an eye on the clock. We got about 40 minutes of the panel left, and Kate and Janie haven't really moved into that part of the conversation.
I'm getting excited. We're talking about disability benefits.
So we're going to go quickly. Have we covered how special needs trust and CalAble are going to work together? Is one exclusive of the other, or how should a family think about the two together?
The two can work together. I think in a lot of cases we're going to see more and more ABLE accounts tied to special needs trusts here. The other thing that, since we're doing this like a racehorse, the other thing that is just mind-blowing, and I was on a committee that helped work with Social Security here on this, is one of the craziest things about SSI is if your child is unable to pay their fair market share of their housing, or for instance, if they live in your house and can't pay either their fair share household share, or fair market value, which in the Silicon Valley is virtually impossible, right? They're going to take a $265 reduction in benefits. Payments from an ABLE account do not count against their housing. So here's the thing that happens. If you were to, for instance, have your child in an apartment, and let's say it was $1,000 a month, if you were to pay $1,000 a month to the landlord, their benefits would be reduced by $265. If you were to put the money in the ABLE account and the ABLE account pays the landlord, then they do not take the reduction. The housing component of these ABLE accounts is mind-blowing in some situations and can mean over $3,000 a year more to the person with a disability. And for folks on public benefits, that is a ton of money.
David, I just want to let the group know too, I know I'm doing a free informational workshop on limited conservatorships on May 10th. I also alternate, I do free informational workshops the second Wednesday of every month in San Jose. And I just did one in April on how special needs trusts work in conjunction with the ABLE Act and government benefits. So I do those periodically if you want to be on my email distribution list when the next one comes up.
Cool.
We can spend an hour and a half on that topic alone.
So Monique, let's move it over to residential supports.
Okay. So, what are the various types of residential services a person with a case at San Andreas can receive? And what is available for those without cases open at Regional Center?
Okay. How much time do we have? This is
3 minutes.
These are big questions.
Let's go.
I'll do a sweeping overview of residential programs.
Yeah, because we did have a training we did this before on residential, so just kind of a reminder to folks in the audience.
Group homes are facilities for kids, okay? Adult residential facilities are what we kind of call group homes for adults. Then there are supported living programs, which is where and group homes and adult residential facilities are licensed. Supported living programs or people that are living semi-independently are programs where the person, the consumer, pays for their own house or apartment. They're responsible for their rent, and then the regional center can staff that with, in supported living, however much staff that person needs, and we would, in-home support services can help out with that. Or if someone's in semi-independent living, they could probably be in that house or apartment fairly independently, and they might need somebody to come out a few times a week to help them out. Those are the 4 basic ones. There are other programs that are being developed out there that kind of fit some concept you might have heard called the final rule, which looks more towards smaller programs that are integrated more into the community. So you'll see some variations on these programs in the future. But the thing to remember, I guess, is that group homes and adult residential facilities are licensed, and when somebody moves in there, their Social Security money goes towards payment of the room and board, where if someone's in a supported living or a semi-independent living, they're responsible for their rent and their PG&E and their food and all that sort of stuff, and those are unlicensed programs, just like anybody else that would be living in the community renting a house or apartment. So that's a sweeping overview of the residential program.
So, what the prior individual was talking about was living arrangements, where he was talking about that $265 reduction. When we talk about Social Security, I'm just going to briefly say this really quick, we have to talk about solvency and the ability to be able to continue to pay these programs. When an individual is unable to pay their fair share of the household expenses, which are the total expenses that we define divided by the number of people in the household, and that makes an individual's fair share. When an individual is unable to pay their fair share, that means the rest of the household must pay it for them, and therefore we must reduce their income accordingly. So I wouldn't necessarily put a negative tone on it. Everybody has their opinions about it, but it's our process, and it makes a lot of sense for us because in reality, in the home, they're getting a lot of support as well. But to piggyback on licensed facilities, for living arrangement purposes, if an individual is in a licensed facility, we pay more money so that we can actually pay for the facility admission. So if your child ends up in a licensed facility, which is a board and care facility, we actually increase the payment from whatever the payment was before, which could be $650 if they're living in the household of another, from $889 if they're living in their own household, to $1,145 if they're in a licensed facility. So there are ranges of our payments depending on what the living situation is.
And there were individual rates.
Yes.
Even the $265, that's not a universal deduction that we're
Yes.
talking about. There's
couple rate deductions
Yeah.
versus an individual rate deduction, just like there's an individual resource limit versus a couple's resource limit.
Great stuff, complicated stuff.
interesting
It's very
stuff.
fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
So all your
Good
notes
stuff.
should just be bullet points, right? To follow up on. I want to ask Janie how IHSS, a brief overview of IHSS services and how it integrates with independent living services that might be funded by regional center.
Okay, brief overview. IHSS is, as I said before, a federal, state, and county funded program. It's, if you're on Medi-Cal, you're eligible. The goal of the program is to keep people in their own homes with personal care assistance so that they can stay in an independent environment for as long as it's possible. You go through, when you call up IHSS, and the first step is to go through the county IHSS system. You get an eligibility worker who will determine if you're eligible for the program. If you're on Medi-Cal, you are deemed eligible already. So that's one reason it's so important to have that Medi-Cal status. After you're deemed eligible, then you're assigned to a social worker. And a social worker will come to your home and they do an evaluation to see how many, quote, hours of service this person is eligible for. The maximum amount of hours is 283 hours a month. And you can get services for IHSS for homemaking services, that's cleaning, laundry, changing the bed, cooking. You can also get what they call medical services, which is to help with personal care services first, which is to help with bathing and personal care services that you might have. There's also paramedical services that you can get. This is with a doctor's prescription, and that might include ostomy care, bowel programs, anything that has to do with paramedical services. let me see. After that's done, the social worker will go back to the office and determine how many hours you get for the month. Then it's your obligation to find a care provider that will work with you. This program is consumer oriented, or the person that's getting the services. That means that they are in charge of hiring, managing, and if necessary, firing their provider. So it does take some skill, and you have to be know how to take care of this person that you're hiring, and you actually are part of that payment process. The state pays the provider for their services as a timesheet that has to be filled out twice a month. And then the consumer, we call the person that's getting the services the consumer, they must also sign that timesheet. So it gets kind of dicey when you have someone that has limited capacity. And that's something that I'm not that familiar with, but I'm assuming that when you have assisted living, then you would have somebody that would help with this process. Who can be the care provider? Anyone that person wants. It could be a family member. It could be someone from the community. The public authority also has a registry of certified workers that have been fingerprinted and have been interviewed, and we go back to do a background check. So you can utilize that service to get a list of names that you have to call and interview before you hire them. So that the public authority won't do that, but they will give you a list of names that you can do that for. So it is a program that's again consumer oriented, and that person has to actually work with. So I know we do a lot of youngsters, family members, a lot of parents are providers of IHSS if they're younger, and then it comes to be a process when they get older as to who they're going to have for that worker.
And what happens if the family disagrees with the number of hours that have been?
Okay, if the family does not agree with the number of hours, there's a process where you can appeal that decision. And on the back of you'll get what they call a notice of action that gives you how many hours you've been awarded and in what categories those hours have been awarded for. If you think that you need more for that particular area, or that they didn't understand what your needs were, then you can do this appeal process where it's reviewed first at the county level, and then you can go before a judge, and they will make the final decision. I do have to say this is a process, and I do a lot of programs where I let folks know the best way to go through the process. And I always say, before you have that social worker come back to do the interview, the initial interview, you yourself should write down what your needs are and how long it takes you to do everything. It's very, very specific. You take a shower. How long does it take you to take that bath or that shower? Everybody's needs are incredibly different. Everybody's time schedule is very different. How long does it take you to eat? Do you need assistance in eating? If you've had a stroke and it's very hard for you to swallow, it might take you a good hour to get that meal down. But you have to be very specific as why you need that extra time.
Mike, can you kind of discuss how supported living services and IHSS services kind of blend together when a person is in a supported living situation?
Sure. When someone is living in their own house or apartment, they probably might need somebody else to help them coordinate things or give them support. And that depends on who the individual is. Some people need more support, some people need less support. One of the rules of the regional center is that you have to access the things that are available to everyone else first. And one of the things that tend to be available for everybody else, if they have Medi-Cal, is in-home support services. So a person would apply for in-home support services and see how many hours they would get. And then if they need additional hours to support them, which often people do, then the regional center can help staff those hours through a vendored agency to provide them other sorts of support. Usually the other hours are more focused on training sort of things. Maybe activities that in-home support services doesn't cover, that are not as custodial care sort of activities. Or maybe sleeping hours or things like that.
Yeah, it's important to know that IHSS does not cover everything. It's not a 24/7 program. It's not meant to be that. I mean, they don't do things like wash windows. They don't do heavy cleaning. They don't do, watching you while you sleep, any of that kind of stuff. It's really quite specific.
Can a staff person from IHSS take the person in the community
Yes,
for shopping?
yes, and for medical appointments.
How about for assistance at work?
Yes, in some circumstances. You have to get permission from the social worker, and it's almost like a waiver program to get.
Bit of a waiver. Okay.
Yeah.
In-home support services actually works with Social Security as well. For in-home support services, there are a number of provisions that we have. Specifically, if you want in-home support services, you don't have to go to in-home support services. You can actually petition Social Security and let them know that you need assistance in your personal care and hygiene. And if you're living in the household of another, or you meet specific qualifications in your living arrangement, we actually send a special referral to in-home support services. They go and they certify the home that there's a care provider for the individual, and then they tell us they're receiving out-of-home, non-medical out-of-home care, and then actually we pay the claimant a higher rate to pay the care provider. So we pay it. So it is possible to get in-home support services through Social Security if your living situation if your living arrangement is a certain situation. So that's something that we have. Also, for our parents who are caring for their SSI children and they are the care providers within home support services, we do not count the income of that parent who is getting in-home support services for caring for the child against the child's SSI payments. So it's completely excluded. It's called an in-home support services deeming exclusion. So a mother who doesn't want to leave her child at home to go get a job because she needs the income can actually then receive income for caring for her child and stay with him. So
really cool.
That's something that we have a provision for. So we're not going to penalize the child if their parent is receiving income for caring for them.
Great. Good. This is helpful information. So we're going to shift to employment and give Kate a chance to talk.
Hi. Yeah.
So Kate, I'll start, Monique, and then I'll let you do the follow-ups. Just why don't you give the quick, what are the various titles of the benefits for those with disabilities that receive Social Security? There's SSI, there's SSA, there's SSDI, there's SSADI, all
Right.
those initials
There-
that our families get
God
kind
forbid
of...
there's SDI.
Yes, all
You
that,
know?
yeah.
So, all right. So we've gone over three of them specifically have been mentioned already. There's Supplemental Security Income, SSI, which is needs-based. We've tossed around that term some. That means that your eligibility for that benefit is based on your financial situation as well as certain
Your
life
living
situations.
Your living situation, the
Yeah.
income that you're receiving, and the resources that you own.
Exactly.
Those are the three key factors.
That's what we mean by needs-based, okay? And so that SSI, there are many different ways you can qualify for that. Children can qualify for SSI,
Yes. It's either
actually, because it's not based on anyone's work record.
No.
Okay, so that is probably the category of benefits that initially most individuals with IDD of some kind are going to initially be qualified for, typically, before they become qualified for this other type, kind of category of benefit called, which the umbrella is Title II. We've talked, and under that umbrella is Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, Childhood Disability Beneficiary Benefits, CDB. It also used to be called Disabled Adult Child Benefits. The old acronym was DAC, okay? And then probably what you guys are not going to see so much is DWB, which is Disabled Widow or Widower's Benefits, all right? So you can imagine you need to be a certain older age, typically, and you have to have been married, all right, to and a number of other circumstances. That's probably the type of benefit, disability-based benefit, that I see and work with the least. Okay, so a lot of times people are really mixed up about what their child even receives. All right, and a couple of kind of quick cheats to figure out what your child might be receiving. It's entirely possible they receive both a Title II type benefit like CDB or something, and they receive SSI. Okay? Yeah, the concurrent beneficiary status. Like, that happens if you're entitled to maybe $400 in CDB, but this person is living in an independent situation, and obviously 400 is less than the standard independent living rate for SSI, which is $895.72 this year. Yes. So you can see a supplement of the SSI to the Title II benefit. A lot of people don't realize that you can have both. And if the person only receives one, if they receive Medicare in any way, shape, or form, they're receiving a Title II benefit of some kind, okay? If they receive Medi-Cal, they may or may not be receiving SSI, okay? For a variety of reasons, which we don't have time to go into. But another kind of quick way to look is if someone gets paid on the first of the month, every month, it's 95% chance it's SSI.
It's actually 100% chance SSI.
Fair enough.
Title II payments, unless it's a holiday or weekend, Title II payments are paid on the 3rd of the month, the 2nd Wednesday of the month, the 3rd Wednesday of the month, or the 4th Wednesday of the month, depending on the birthday of the main account holder, which is the work history holder. So it's either the individual themselves or their parent.
So I think one clarification to make is if you're receiving CDB benefits, the childhood disability benefits, you're pulling on your parent's work record. It has nothing to do with the work that this individual themselves has done. You can even see sometimes someone will get a payment both on their own work record and their parents' work record. And God forbid if they also receive SSI.
It's called a dual entitlement.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of amalgamations of how these benefits can link together and who gets what entitlement when, okay, depending on their life situation and on the life situation of the parent or other individuals.
Thank you, great.
So if one of their children under the age of 18 is receiving SSI, do they automatically
this is a good
qualify
one, yeah.
for SSI as an adult?
Age 18 redetermination is what you are referring to. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, no. So age 18 redetermination is the assessment that Social Security makes to determine if someone who had childhood disability SSI childhood benefits entitlement is still eligible for adult entitlement. The difference between these two entitlements,
Well, we don't consider SSI an entitlement. It's an eligibility program. Social Security disability insurance is an entitlement because you've paid into this program and we are required to pay you. SSI.
I think the buzzword is insurance. It's an insurance that you're getting.
So
whereas supplemental security is based on the fact that you have a disability and your income is limited.
Yeah, so we're trying to transition our language. When we talk about benefits, we talk about the insurance program. When we talk about SSI, we say assistance payments because that's what we consider it to be. It's an assistance payments. There's a beneficiary, which is a person entitled to benefits for our purposes when we're talking about definitions. And an SSI individual is not a beneficiary, they're a recipient. So we have our language that way, and it actually helps people understand their benefits more when we're clarifying the titles and the differences between the two. So when we're talking about an age 18 redetermination, when a child is a disabled child and they're receiving payments, generally our review process for the medical condition is 3 to 7 years, depending on the type of condition. But as soon as age 18 hits, we do a medical review immediately, and we review actually their payments for the review period of 24 months. And then once the decision comes back from the Disability Determination Unit of California, which makes all of our decisions in California for disabled individuals, they would let us know if we have to cease the payments because the child appears to be able to join the workforce because of their disability has either improved or whatever the case may be, or if they will continue on as an adult and they change their beneficiary or their recipient title from a disabled child to a disabled individual.
So the key words I think that we were taught, that you mentioned there, was able to work. Okay, so if if DDS, Disability Determination Services for California, determines that even if this child has not worked up to this point or something, if they decide that they have the capacity to work, which was not part of the entitlement, not part of the eligibility process for childhood benefits, then with that introduction of this second criteria of a medically disabled person who is unable to support themselves through work, if they don't meet that two-pronged definition, then they're not going to receive adult benefits. Okay?
And I want to clarify, we don't make determinations whether a person is disabled or not. We make determinations whether a person is disabled to the point where they cannot support themselves through substantial gainful activity. And we have monetary limits that classify if an individual is able to actually support themselves or not.
And it's interesting that you say support themselves, because it is substantial gainful activity, but the substantial gainful activity amount that the person, if they could earn this much, they're not going to qualify for SSI or benefits, adult benefits. However, what is that substantial gainful activity amount in 2017?
The substantial gainful activity amount for 2017 is, so there's differences between individuals who are blind and not blind. So you have to take that into consideration when we're talking about these figures. For a non-blind individual, it's gross 1,130.
No, it's 1,170.
Excuse me, that was last year.
Yeah.
1,170, I apologize for that. For a blind individual, it's 1,950.
Is that per month?
Per month. Gross.
So let's be honest, in the Bay Area, that's a laughable amount of being able to support yourself.
So it's not truly can they support themselves, it's just if can they make 1170.
Well, by our definitions.
Which is a federally determined threshold.
Right.
Okay?
The way I've always kind of said it, if you're able to make that amount of money, it demonstrates you're able to work, and then it becomes your burden to start making more money. That's how I've always kind of perceived it from the federal point of view.
But there are some people that couldn't make more money, that they can their disability only enables them to work part-time and that sort of thing.
It's
so
kind of
really
bad
sad.
logic. It's logic, but it's bad logic.
You make 1170, you don't get back.
It's a tough situation, and again, especially in these high cost of living environments, like I'm sure none of you are aware of this, Silicon Valley, high cost of living, you know.
So Kate,
the threshold is the same for Utah and Vermont and here and, you know.
Hold on just a second. I'm going to give about 5 more minutes before we end our panel, because I have we have some questions from the audience. But I have 2 questions for you, Kate, and then Michelle can fit in. First of all, Kate, what do you do, and why should people know how to contact you?
She's wonderful. She's a very great resource.
Oh no! God bless you. No, but
you have a short minute.
Yeah.
I have a second question about
all right. What I do is I advise people specifically on how their federal disability benefits, SSI, SSDI, those acronyms we just went over, how those, and even financial benefits like housing subsidies and CalFresh would interact with a return to work. Okay, so there's a whole system of work incentives and protections that are available to people to keep cash payments, health coverage, housing, food stamps, any number of these financial supports, and you can be earning money and out in the community and reaping all the benefits that come with work. There are these thresholds and these rules, and that is my bread and butter to know about them, you know, so that nothing surprises people depending on when they choose to go back to work. Honestly, I'm so happy to be talking with people who are in the lives of young people, because the sooner you can get people working, there's so many benefits to it, all right? Especially for people who receive SSI and Medi-Cal, there are so many protections and incentives that are even specific to young people And a lot of times people are afraid to go to work because they don't want to lose everything. And that's just not the case most of the time.
So can you touch on the SEIE work incentive?
Yeah.
Since we have a lot of young people.
Absolutely. SEIE is the Student Earned Income Exclusion. All right, and this is amazing, I think. So basically, it's a special work incentive for people who receive SSI, and it's kind of a unicorn case. So someone who is on SSI is a full-time student and who is working. All right, you just get a certain amount. It can be I think I have last year's thresholds in my head still. I'm sorry, but these thresholds change annually. Yeah, and I don't see it a whole lot, so forgive me. I don't know the exact numbers, but you can have up to a certain amount per month of your earned income just outright disregarded 100% if you're under 22 and meet those conditions, or an annual limit of about, I think, like 7,000 something.
I can get the actual figures at the tabletops.
Yeah,
Show you some
absolutely. And it's in these pamphlets that I have. But yeah, it's incredibly powerful. It's for young people to really try to get them working and in the workforce.
So if one were to contact you, it's best by phone and maybe in person or by email?
I'm a millennial. I like email, I like phone, I like,
Because the reason they want to contact you is to avoid getting that letter saying you have an overpayment.
Yeah. When
right?
you're already there, I can advise on that and I can help people with that initial, but you are 10 steps in at that point.
So you get that scary letter that says you have an overpayment. This job is to prevent that letter from being sent. So
pretty much.
And now you also work in San Mateo, but your region includes?
Yeah, so my program, and I am one of 4 currently who have the exact position that I have. We cover 12 counties. My specialization is Santa Clara, Santa Cruz counties. All right, so, and I'm covering San Francisco, Marin, and Solano right now. But I stay busy. But yeah, we have a 12 county coverage area, and likely if you're living in the Bay Area, you're in our catchment. Okay?
All right, and Michelle, the final question to you is, what are some tips and tricks to reach a decision maker at Social Security?
Okay, so I was reading this question before I came and I was like, what do you mean? So are we talking about in terms of approving a disability decision? Are you talking about in terms of a work review? Or
Well, here's my take on things. One, several letters arrive in the mail on or about the same time from different posts, from different addresses. And they each say something similar and different at the same time. That's problem one.
Yeah.
The other thing is you call that 1-800 number and you talk to those folks. Their answers is very generalized, not specific, and seems to not really hit the mark on the particular question being asked. And then the third issue is when you do go to Social Security and you're able to get into the front at the window, the information you're getting just doesn't have that sense of accuracy. Like, we're uncertain that what's being advised at that window isn't really accurate, and it has us feeling uncertain at the end of our meeting. Is that fair? Yeah.
Wow. I can see some experience.
So fix that.
First of all, I would like to say, if that's your experience, thank you for your feedback. Our agency is working diligently to improve our customer service. My suggestions to you, which I actually suggest to all my people that I talk to, is if you want information about Social Security, a letter you received, a question that you have, the National 1-800 number is a great resource. However, the key word is national. Programs can vary state to state. Information can vary state to state. So then that means that the information you're going to get from the national line is going to be general and limited and may confuse you a little bit more than you were before you called. So what I recommend that you do is you actually call your local field office. And you will get an actual representative who's either a trained customer service representative in the program, a claims specialist that's been trained in the program, to be able to give you more accurate information. Now, if you've had experiences where you go to a field office and you feel the information just doesn't make sense or doesn't seem like it's right, which, there has been feedback that does happen, you can either, if you feel the information is not correct, you can actually ask to speak to a supervisor to get clarification. Or you can get a wonderful representative like me who can explain everything thoroughly and you'll feel
And I was going to say, claims reps are golden. You tell. They're great.
You get me, I was kidding. That was a joke.
So what's the hierarchy? Tell the hierarchy, because you're a
Okay.
claims rep.
So basically, when we're talking about the hierarchy of the at Social Security Administration, you can start off at clerical if we're going to talk about hierarchy, but they're not trained in the programs. So an individual who's trained in the programs would start off as a customer service representative, and that's what I started out as. And it was the best training that I had because you learn all of the information about all the programs, and you're not really specialized. And so you know about retirement and Medicare, and you know about disability insurance, and you know about SSI, resources, income, and how it all affects things differently. The next step up would be a claims specialist, and it's either in the program of insurance or it's in the SSI program. I happen to get lucky enough to be in the SSI program, which I love. It tends to be a more complicated program. The clientele tends to be more complicated to deal with, but it happens to be a passion of mine, and I love working with disabled individuals. I love providing that, experience of dignity, respect, and assistance to the community, which is what I really like. So in that instance, we're talking about those particular types of individuals. So you're specialized in actually taking initial applications, and you're also specialized in post-entitlement, which would mean work CDRs, meaning we're doing a review of your work to make sure that you're not earning so much as to get off payments or being overpaid. Yes. Then after that is operations supervisor. Or actually, before that is a technical expert, which is my next step, where you become a technical expert in your program where everyone is referring you to the difficult cases. Then after that is an operations supervisor. So generally speaking, if you're feeling you're not getting information, usually you're going to talk to a customer service representative. Number one, they're not specialized in the programs. So they may not have 100% all the most accurate information as a claims specialist would have. So if you have a letter from SSI, and it's a very complicated letter, you can ask to see an SSI claims specialist. And what happens is you go from a window interview to a backroom interview where you actually sit down, we look at your case, we look in the electronic file, we put everything together, and we give you an explanation of exactly what's going on. And usually at that point in time, people feel more comfortable with the information because we have enough time to explain a complicated situation.
And is that a 1 week cycle, a 4 week cycle, an 8 week cycle? When would you get to that point?
Ideally, it's your first visit. Ideally, and that's what we strive for. However,
You might have to have an appointment.
you might have to have an appointment.
I'm a big believer in trying to get people to make appointments,
Yes.
especially if they have multiple questions.
Yes. If you have a complicated issue that's going to take 30 minutes to an hour, a walk-in interview is not going to suffice. You should schedule an appointment so we actually have a block of time to sit down with you and really resolve the issue that you
Get
have.
real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, face to face.
So your interaction would be, I think I have a complicated case, or I think it's going to need to be reviewed by a claims supervisor specialist.
Yes. And if you're
Can we schedule a
deterred,
meeting
if
for
you're
that?
deterred saying that we cannot do this, please insist. We must accommodate any and all appointments that you insist upon.
Friendly but firm, people.
Yes.
Friendly but firm. It
Great
is
stuff.
your right to talk to a claims specialist.
It is your right to get any information, and
Right,
also, it is your right to be disclosed policy references. We have certain policy references that we can't disclose, but we have policy references that are available to the public, and it is your right to see all information that we've used to make a determination, including the law.
Yes. And let's just note that Michelle is very good at what she does.
We need more Michelles, right? How many
Yeah.
Michelles are there, Michelle?
There's actually quite a few Michelles. You would be
Fair.
surprised. And we are working every day to make sure that our quality of service is the same across the board. That is a really big thing in our area right now, where we are trying to make sure that your experience is the same if you come to my office and talk to me, than if you go to the East San Jose office and talk to somebody, than if you go to the South San Jose office and talk to somebody, or Mountain View. That is what our goal is. So we're hoping to get that way. Can we guarantee that that's what's going on? Apparently from the feedback, it's not really going on, but we're going to transition and make sure that that's happening. That's what we would like.
Types, SSI and other types, so should we ask for one considering the demographic here?
So when we're talking about benefits, again, what we were discussing is you should know what you're getting. Because everything affects the programs differently. Work affects SSI a lot differently than it affects disability insurance.
Different beasts.
And if you're receiving concurrent benefits both at the same time, then you're gonna wanna get a specialist that knows both programs to be able to give you the most.
So is there a claim
important information.
specialist that is duly trained?
We do have generalist claim specialists, and it's very difficult to be a generalist claim specialist because the programs are so detailed that in and of itself, learning one is very complicated and takes a lot of knowledge, and to retain both programs is difficult. However, we have those people.
So if you have SSDI as opposed to SSI, who should transfer?
I would recommend that if any individual has SSI, whether they have SSDI or not, you talk to an SSI claim specialist.
Okay, folks, I want to stick to our tight timeline. I'm sorry, this is I'm not sure I'm sure you're better educated, but you're also, it's more
It's okay to feel like you're swimming right now. This is all of us do this for our livelihood.
It's a general overview, and what you have here are like the points of intersect where you have to begin your consideration on your child's future planning. We are gonna let's kind of move toward wrapping up. It looks like well, first of all, let's just hear it for our panelists.
I know.
So we got a bit of a brain trust here, so I hope you all got contact information and that sort of thing. And folks, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything now before you open?
Oh, funny.
No, we really appreciate it.
Very sweet.
Great.
Thank you.
Please fill out your final surveys. Did everybody get their questions asked?
Asked or answered?
Posted
Answered, you mean?
Pardon? The ones that you put on your Post-its, yes. Are there still any out there?
Oh, it is asked.
Go ahead.
I didn't get a chance to ask Michelle, but so, we were talking about how there's a $2,000 limit and that was set back some number of years and should be inflation adjusted. What is Social Security or Congress or whoever needs to do something to correct that, because that's just going to keep getting worse. I mean, there needs to be some kind of adjustment, and then there needs to be a mechanism to maintain cost of living increases.
That's actually a very great question. And what we do whenever an individual says, how can these policies be, still this way when we're talking about inflation and cost of living, our response is, talk to your congressman. Those are the individuals that have the power to make the legislative changes to our program to make it more in line with what the economy is right now. So if you're interested in protecting your child's future, it takes like ground root levels to be able to make the necessary changes that we would like to see to offer more support to our disabled individuals.
That sounds great, but it's been going for how many years? 20 years, and it still hasn't happened, so something's not working.
Well, it could indicate that maybe we don't have enough rallying for people to make these changes.
If I can make a suggestion as far as that's concerned. By the way, for Congress, the biggest issue they deal with is Social Security, okay? But be that as it may, I would suggest that everybody should join the ARC. And if you join the California ARC, I happen to be on the board of the ARC, but even so, it's only $25. The ARC is the major leader in this area trying to push for Social Security change. There's a group called the SCDD, which is the Citizens of Something Disability. There's so many acronyms. There's also a project right now, and we'll be listing it on our YouTube channel, which is a SSI reform project. And here's the thing that comes up, and the problem that you run into is, yes, we're running into deficits and we have to have sustainable programs. On the other hand, there was a promise made in the 60s to shut down the institutions for well-funded programs. It said nothing about needs-based benefits, and it morphed into this program. And so we are in a different category because, once again, Agnew State Hospital here, who took care of these folks for all these years, is shut down with the promise that the resources would be moved. So I would really urge you folks that in California, if you go to The ARC California, just Google The ARC California, that is the leading program. They have a thing called the Lanterman Coalition. Once you join that, you're a member of the national, and what you'll see is a major push to make these changes and also work on the solvency issues with Social Security, because the problem that's going on with Congress right now is there's a focus on, yes, there are people that are scamming the system and that kind of thing. Our population is not scamming the system. They're focused on like the New York police folks that are playing tennis here and collecting on disability, and that's what's called fraud, okay? Our folks don't commit fraud. They just don't. So, I mean, really, advocacy is the key. This should have been taken care of years ago. We need a groundswell. The numbers that we're dealing with are just stark raving stupid anywhere in the country. And in the Silicon Valley here, you know, $895 is not enough to pay for your basic housing and food and shelter needs. It's just out of touch. It's just wrong.
That's the main question that we get. How can I live off of this? And I have to tell people every day in a situation that I'm not in why I can't give them more money, no matter how much I would like to.
And that's why kind of in my role, I mean, there needs, obviously, everyone here is 100% on board. There needs to be wider reform, but the only way that I can see if someone is on disability benefits to get more money is to work.
So there's no administrative processes that say, hey, there was something missed, it has to go back through Congress.
Yes, so as much as the Social Security Administration would love to be able to have our agents actually influence the policy, we have very, very limited influence. We have what we call suggestions that we can make.
Yeah.
And then from there, they'll either evolve to actual changes or they won't evolve at all.
Jonathan Martinez here said what we need to do is put our stories out there. The messages that are being communicated via the social media or the news networks are not accurate, particularly not accurate for our folks with developmental disabilities. So there is a need for stories. If you have one of the things that we're in the midst of dodging now is healthcare reform and how that might affect Medicaid. And the state council is soliciting stories of why Medicaid is essential for your family, why the waiver, the community-based services are important for your child to remain independent in the community. Feel free to submit us those stories, and we have an association that delivers those stories directly to congressmen. And then just another bit of advice, advocacy is tricky, public advocacy is very tricky. The story of how CalAble got enacted is a very interesting story. It's kind of gotten a YouTube following, so maybe looking up CalAble and how it became law and take some tips from that and see how you might want to, as a family or as a political advocate, think like that, like those folks think, to get laws to change. Okay.
I would probably say it starts with the community. We need to let the congressman know how many disabled individuals are in our area, are in our district.
Yes.
The number of children, that are disabled, and the number of people that are, trying to plan the future of their children. And if they're made aware of it, that's what incites change. Do you believe the congressman really truly knows how many disabled individuals are in their district? If you were to go ask them.
There's another issue to look at too, because I am in a unique position, so I get to travel across the country and look at other systems. Colorado at one time had a very robust system for folks with developmental disabilities. It has been almost totally decimated, okay? You think that can't happen in California? Our programs are hanging by a thin thread. We were able, because of advocacy here in the Latterman Coalition, to get what I consider a pitiful raise that took us from an impossible situation for the services that are provided here to something where it was the first raise, I think, in 15 years. It depends on how you count it. Imagine running a program on a budget that was set 15 years ago. We were able to get that done. Is everything okay? Absolutely not. If you are on a board of a program that's providing services, you are wondering how you're going to make it through the next year. And the thing about it is, don't be comfortable. This is why, once again, through advocacy with legislators, by really bringing it to their attention about why it is our community is different, and it is different here. We need more attention, but we need to turn up the pressure here, because in all seriousness, you go back to how much should I set aside for my child? And if the system as it stays now, as as poorly funded as it is, the amount you need might be moderate. If we become like Colorado, you guys don't have enough money to be able to provide the same supports that we have now. IHSS is another good example. There's a lot of folks that would be in institutions if it were not for IHSS. What is the program that is always on the chopping block? IHSS, because of the costs involved in it. But imagine if that program went under, how many people would end up in nursing homes. It would cost us more money and all of that. It's one of those things where you really got to get involved because you have a stake in this. I make my living off the system being dysfunctional. So if you guys fix this, it'd be bad for me. But you know what? I have a lot of faith that I'm going to be okay. You really at a certain level, don't panic, but you need to have a certain level of being uncomfortable. And if you're not uncomfortable, you're not in touch with what's going on.
And honestly, that's why all of us here who have different perspectives on different aspects of the financial planning process, I don't think that it's a reasonable plan of action to think that you're going to rely on one branch of financing for the rest of your child's life. Or yours. You need all of this. I mean, you need to have the awareness of what federal benefits are available to you, what local benefits, what private arrangements you can be making, and what your child is capable of doing for themselves, i.e. work.
Great. So let's start with, let Stephen Dale wear his Hawaiian shirts in a Hawaii camp. Move him toward retirement. Okay. Go ahead.
I have a question. So this is a post-it question. Why can't you have both conservatorship and supportive decision-making? Why are they at odds with each other?
I think supported decision-making is a paradigm and a way of thinking, and it can be implemented across power of attorney, a conservatorship. But before you conserve somebody, you want to ask, what have you tried first? Because when you conserve someone, you're taking away their rights. So what have you tried first in order to have them be as independent as possible? So why conserve them if they don't need to be conserved?
See, I don't see them at odds. I see them as two different tools. Mm-hmm. You can go one or the other or do something in between. Like, for instance, maybe your child is able to make decisions about housing and all sorts of other things. Maybe there's some medical things where you really need to be a little bit more hands-on. That's one of the few nice things about our system is you can just take that piece. By the way, you can always start giving up powers as time goes on as well. I don't see them as one or the other. I see them as two different tools, and you might have A, you might have B, you might have A and B. And maybe you do zero, you know, what?
It's not a black,
yeah.
It's not a black and white box. It's really individualized, and different decisions can be made by different individuals. So. And
as a conservator, it doesn't preclude you from asking the advice and the choices of your son or daughter. And so, like Suzanne was saying, it's a way of thinking, a person-centered way of thinking that can be incorporated across all decision-making paradigms.
And I will add, even in Santa Clara County, the judge actually advises the conservators that you need to work with the conservatee and make informed decisions, include the conservatee to the extent you can in all the decision-making process. While we're taking powers away, it's to protect the individuals from being taken advantage of, but we are supposed to include that person in the decision-making process. So it's not like they're appointed as conservators and now they're not going to worry about what the conservatee believes. They need to include that person so that we're supposed to be working towards maximum independence and self-reliance through the conservatorship. You're not doing that if you're not including the conservatee in the decision-making process. So I think it's really important that that person is included in the decision-making process.
And those skills build over time. So start wherever your individual is at their level.
Where they are.
And go from there.
And even folks who are in like Hope Workshop or their, that mentality is that person-centered planning mentality is one that they're putting into legislation. CC and IR, some of you might know is career counseling and information and referral. And whether they're conserved or not, folks are expected to participate in that and to have a discussion about what they see as employment and how they expect to go into the work world.
And there's a webinar coming up on May 3rd. If you're interested in learning some more information, the information's on the Dale Law Firm webinar.
So this will be part 3, and you can watch 1 and 2. 2 will be going up this week.
I just wanted to add that everything I've heard today is amazing, but don't forget, parents in this room, it starts, it ends, it continues with you. We may have laws that say one thing, we may have judges that say involve people, we may have person-centered planning and thinking guidelines, unless you, with the care and love you have for your children, are embracing these opportunities and empowering your children, it's not going to happen. I was talking with someone here today, and the coolest thing he said, you know what, people don't talk to me, you know, they look past me, and I almost can't blame them. It's been that way for 40 years. And I said, I do blame them. I do blame people who are doing things the same way they did 40 years ago. In what system is it okay to do things the way it was done 40 years ago? Y'all think Elon Musk is doing things the way it was done 40 years ago? We know better now. We have 40 years of studies to back up the impact of independence and self-determination. So as parents, the wishes and the hopes and the dreams that you have for your children, you are the guardians of that, and the guardian, capital G. There is no law that can make you a guardian or conservator more than you already are. So take that authority, that moral authority, and work to lift your children up to the highest point you can. And people like Suzanne and Mr. Dale, who are saying there are ways that are different from the way we've always done things, they're the ones who are going to make sure that you are not exceptions, you're pioneers. And your children's children, or your grandchildren, or your nieces and nephews, they're going to benefit from that. Every day we get a little bit closer to that area where we live up to our ideals. It's been really an honor to be here and listen to so many of you talk about it. Thank you so much.
I'd like to do a little plug for person-centered thinking, our class we offer at PHP. We have one coming up in June and another one in August. It's a 3-day program, 5 hours each day. And it's really an incredible training that empowers parents to create a person-centered plan. And kudos to SARC. They are sending all of their caseworkers through this training this year. So I think at the end of this calendar year, all the caseworkers at SARC will be virtual.
I think they've almost all gone through it. So,
so as parents, when you are versed in the same thing, you and your case manager will be speaking the same language. So.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. First of all, thank you all very much. Fill out your green sheeted surveys. So, I don't know about you, but about midway through my eyes started glazing over because it's so complicated, and I'm trying to assess what we just did here. I know we're all confused, and it's hard. So, we kind of think in terms of roadmaps, and today I want you to kind of consider today as we had a blank sheet of paper, and now we've given names to the roads that we're going to be driving down. And so our map is not at all complete, but you at least know what the direction the roads go, and you can figure out how to get from point A to point B eventually by continuing to connect with our panel, to doing your online research, and to feeling free to ask among yourselves and all of us on how to do best for your children and their financial futures. With that, one other announcement. This is going to be on some sort of social media via YouTube, Stephen Dale's site, and a PHP site that may or may not exist. We don't know yet. And we will be announcing that, so share information with those who couldn't make it that they can access the panel discussion via the web soon. Finally, the collaborative is going to continue to meet, and we're going to take on an easier task next time, the medical system.
Yeah! Easy peasy.
So,
yeah.
Be prepared. All right, everybody. Thank you very, very much.
our survey's over here.
I kind of want to make an announcement.